So, okay, so thank you, all of you. Wow, there's a bunch of you, over 300. That's great. So I'm going to put on some video footage of me organizing the first anti-GMO campaign anywhere on Earth. It was 1987. It was against a GMO bacterium called Frostban. God, this doesn't work here. Okay. What happened was I'd been very inspired by Jeremy Rifkin, who was really the only guy talking about GMOs, but he wrote these books, and he would give talks like the ones that you hear on, or shows like Democracy Now! So he was always talking about these things, but there wasn't really any group that was dealing with it. There weren't any, the Sierra Club, Audubon, none of those groups were taking on GMOs. Earth Island wasn't doing it. And then in 1986, Jeremy Rifkin called up the East Bay Green Alliance in Berkeley, and that was the green group that I worked with. And a lot of us were in both Bay Area Earth First and the East Bay Green Alliance. And so those of us who were Earth Firsters organized a protest at the Berkeley headquarters of AGS in 1986. And it was just a one-off demo. We just had our protest signs. But we did get, I think, a full column in Time or Newsweek magazine, so you can look that up. And they've got a picture there of some of the protesters holding up their signs. So that was the first protest that I know of against GMOs in 1986. And what happened was the company was going to do a test in Monterey County, but they got caught releasing the bacterium on their rooftop in Berkeley. And when I worked at that event center, Shared Visions, it was just a block or two away from there. And so what happened was they got caught. And now this really sucks. And this is something that's definitely worth sticking in your brain pan there, because we don't think about these kinds of things when we argue against some kind of development or some kind of horrible technology. The president of the company, a man named John Bedbrook, was having an affair with one of the scientists at Advanced Genetic Sciences. And she was doing some kind of test on the rooftop in their greenhouses, and with some kind of trees or something. And I guess the greenhouses were all full. And so Bedbrook didn't want to make her stop her test for weeks or months so that they could do their test, their first test, inside the contained greenhouse by injecting the GMO bacteria into the tree. So they considered that not an open air release when you inject it into the tree. And so what they did is they set up the trees outside of the greenhouse and injected them into the trees. And the stuff ran off in the rain, down the rain gutters and into the bay. And so the county of Monterey was not happy about that at all. Yet the counties can't ban these kinds of tests that are approved at the state or federal level. So they very cleverly came up with a zoning law. And this is another thing to keep in mind. You don't, the most direct route to engage your opponent is not always the most effective one. You might want to go way the fuck away and then come back later. So what they did is they passed a zoning law that said that you couldn't do any tests within, I think it was 4 miles of any home in Monterey County. Okay. Well, there isn't a single home that's not within 4 miles of another home. So that meant that they could ban them from doing the tests in Monterey County without actually banning the organism. So the project was stopped for a year. And then in 1987, a year later, since it was the Earth Firsters who had organized the demonstration, we got contacted. I'm not sure if it was by Jeremy or somebody else. And we were told that they were now looking at 2 different places, one in San Benito County and near Hollister, which was east of Monterey, and the other was in Contra Costa County, outside the town of Brentwood. So suddenly, we had 2 areas that we had to go to try to organize resistance to stop these tests. Well, Bay Area Earth First was a very small group. There was probably 20 people max, and a lot of those people didn't frequently come. So there was about a dozen of us. And we were already working on Headwaters Forest, and it was our group out of which Randy Hayes and Mike Rozelle and a bunch of the rest of us started the Rainforest Action Network. We were also fighting the destruction of butterfly habitat on San Bruno Mountain, which is just south of San Francisco. And we were doing major projects there that took up a lot of activist time. So there was nobody else but me who was willing to take on this GMO campaign and trying to fight it in 2 different places. So that's what 1987 was, and I had gone to UC San Diego to become a marine biologist, so I studied peer-reviewed science. So several people contacted me. One was a scientist who had been fired from Advanced Genetic Sciences. He was one of the guys who sort of exposed what was going on. And so he contacted me, and he would do all this scientific research and look up all the permits with California Department of Food and Agriculture. And then he would go through all of it and highlight certain parts. And then he'd call me up, and I'd go over to his place, and he'd go over all this stuff with me. And then I would present it at the press conference. So I was willing to look at the science, although I couldn't. I'm not a geneticist. I'm an ecologist and a chemist. So I definitely had a lot of help with that guy. I couldn't have done it without him. And then we went out to the town of Brentwood. I think because it was closer, we just decided that we would do the organizing in Brentwood. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So I wasn't the only one in Bay Area Earth First. Jeff Hoffman and Dennis Fritzinger also helped out, but they weren't willing to really do the major work on the campaign to learn the genetics, do press conferences, and the rest. But they definitely helped, and there's a picture of me wearing a T-shirt my sister gave me saying, "Don't confuse me. My mind's made up. Don't confuse me with the facts," at the first press conference protest that we did out in Brentwood. And you can see Dennis standing behind me holding a sign saying it's not nice to fool Mother Nature, I guess. So anyway, what happened was the company was going to make a presentation to the Board of Supervisors and the public out in Brentwood, and we drove out there, and we sat in the audience, and we were total jerks to these people. Well, appropriate. I shouldn't say we were jerks, but we just gave them a total hard time. And there was some news coverage, and I guess this attorney who worked for a conservative law firm in San Francisco that represented the California Medical Association called up the Berkeley Ecology Center, and he was trying to find me. Well, Karen Pickett, who was in our Bay Area Earth First group, also worked at the Berkeley Ecology Center, so she was able to give the guy my phone number. And he called me up, and he said he wanted to do a lawsuit against the company, against CDFA, I guess. So suddenly, I was working with that guy, which was kind of amazing. And then Jeremy Rifkin was sort of a phone consultant I talked to every once in a while. He came up with this idea later on that because the president of the company had said that if the people of the town had said they were opposed to the test taking place in their community, they wouldn't do it. So he suggested that we go out to Brentwood and collect signatures on petitions and then have a big press conference at AGS headquarters to present these petitions to the president of the company and remind him that he said, okay, if the people don't want it, that they won't do the test. So Jeremy, he still owes me $125 for this, but he suggested we hire those, what are they called? People who just deliver things, couriers, I guess, to deliver the press release to all of these media outlets in the Bay Area, AM radio, TV, and newspapers. And we did that, and we had a big old press conference there. and I got on TV. And for about 3 or 4 weeks, I was on TV, well, on all 4 of the Bay Area channels, CBS, NBC, ABC, and Fox TV. And because I was so respectful of the journalists, which came from me being a journalist myself. I was a journalist starting in 9th grade, the Milliken Ray, my junior high school. So I knew what journalists need, and so I would present them with information. I wasn't just ranting at them, and they would take tons of notes. I can remember one time, I think it was at press conference with Dennis behind me out in Brentwood, that I saw they were taking like 20 or 30 pages of notes. And it was really cool because on these TV shows, as you'll see, they all chose different aspects of the issue to talk about. So it wasn't just like 1 or 2 points on the issue. And so I started thinking about these presentations as a way of educating the whole population of Bay Area TV news watchers. And it was great. It was, like I said, it went on for about 4 weeks before the test. And so I got to be on those TV shows. And as you'll see, there's a little quip from me on the ABC National News. Peter Jennings did that. These people, they're mad scientists. They really are. It was pretty amazing because nobody ever called me or our group alarmist. The Republican types, the conservatives, seem to be just as concerned as anybody else. So GMOs is one of those unique issues where we really have, I would say, more than 80% of the population on our side. So don't think of yourself as being a little environmentalist ghetto as when you try to organize against GMOs. So let's see. So what I have here, I lost a lot of my footage in the Oakland firestorm in 1991. So these are a collection of some of the clips that somehow I'd saved, or friends, maybe I'd made them for friends on a videotape, and they gave them back to me after the fire. So you're going to see them in chronological order, the ones I have. It kind of skips around, which is why I've talked to you so much about this. You'll be able to recognize some of these things. And there were 2 tests. One was in April 1987, and the other was December 1987. And you'll see a radical change in my appearance between the two because of the difference between the 2 tests being, 6-7 months. So that's a lot of fun. So I'll play that through. It's about a half an hour, all of them. There's probably about a dozen clips. And you'll see how by just watching these clips, you'll learn a lot about this particular organism and the different reasons why we opposed it. And then I'll tell you what happened a year later, because despite what you're going to see, it ended up being a very, very successful campaign. In 2002, the BBC came out to my house here in Garberville, right here where you see me, right over there. Right there, I was sitting and the BBC was there, and they told me that I was a BBC World Historic Figure as the world's first anti-genetically engineered crop trasher. So that's the story. So let's get on with that. Hope you enjoy it. It should be a lot of fun.
Near Brentwood. It'll be the site of a major scientific experiment.
Outdoor experiments are set to begin on frostban. That's the genetically engineered bacteria we've been telling you about that's supposed to keep plants from freezing. Advanced Genetic Sciences of Oakland has been testing frostban in these greenhouses for months. Now they have the go-ahead from the EPA to spray it on open fields. One of the 3 possible sites is this field in Brentwood in Contra Costa County. People who live near there say they have some reservations, but no real objections.
I think that it's safe, and I think people have to realize it's just something new, and you can't be afraid of everything new.
One thing that I would like to know more about is what about the insects that might carry this bacteria, and farm machinery that might transport it.
It seems to me it'd be better to test it in a field that's way out in the desert or somewhere where it wouldn't be close to a community like Contra Costa County.
The other two possible test sites are in San Benito County near Hollister. The spraying will start sometime in April.
Frostban, the genetically altered bacteria that's supposed to protect crops from cold weather. This week, the state gave its approval for the first open-air testing in Contra Costa County on a strawberry patch in Brentwood. But as Sandra Stricker found out, Frostban is still getting an icy reception from people opposed to the project.
The people against testing Frostban out of doors say they will sue to stop it. A similar lawsuit brought another project like this to a complete halt near Tule Lake. Opponents to Frostban claim not enough tests have been done to make sure that it's safe.
The EPA has allowed Advanced Genetic Sciences to test this in the environment when there have been virtually no tests done to determine health effects.
The company wants to start testing this weekend. If a lawsuit is filed, that could force them to postpone. Right now, the earliest they could start testing here would be this Friday at dawn. The company says 4 years of testing has turned up nothing to indicate that Frostban is dangerous.
This experiment has been subject to more regulation, more testing than any other experiment for agriculture.
A petition signed by 1,500 residents against testing Frostban in Contra Costa County was presented by a coalition of environmental groups who demanded to see the president of the company.
You want the president to come down here?
He won't be down.
Why not?
If you'd like to leave it, I'd be happy to
Do you have a
take it
statement
out.
from him?
Meanwhile, out in Brentwood, machines to monitor the site are in place. The strawberry patch where the testing is supposed to be done is ready, and some of the people who usually work the fields nearby are worried.
A lot of people here really don't know what's going on, how dangerous it is for them, for their children, their unborns.
A lot of us don't know the day that they're doing it exactly, and I want to take my children out of the house and kind of out of the area when they do it, just in case.
In Brentwood, Sandra Stricker, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
Opponents of the testing are planning to file their lawsuit tomorrow in Sacramento. The mayor of Brentwood, Catherine Palmer, told Eyewitness News she considers the lawsuit frivolous and said the city has no plans to pull out of its agreement for the testing of Frostban.
Now, Channel 7 News at 6, a Bay Area tradition, with Pete Wilson, Suzanne Saunders, Dr. Dina Dell, meteorologist Pete Giddings, and Mike Berry with sports.
Good evening, everyone. From the very beginning, there have been protesters. Each time, scientists have tried to test genetically altered bacteria outside the laboratory. Environmental groups and even some farmers have rallied and railed against the whole idea. Now the scientists are preparing an open-air test of Frostban in Contra Costa County. And again, the protests. Now, Bill Van Amberg reports tonight that if the protests fail this time, Frostban could be sprayed as early as Friday.
It's historic precedent, both scientifically, politically, and in the regulatory sense. And that is why government agencies should make a thorough and complete review of this process. Without an EIR, that is not possible. This is setting a bad precedent if it goes ahead without an EIR.
This gathering was an impassioned, though small, 11th-hour attempt by concerned groups to ban the test of Frostban, which is all but guaranteed now for the end of the week on this Brentwood field. It will be the first such release of genetically altered organisms into the environment. And while the federal government, local governments, and now the state have said okay, this group brought petitions to show 1,500 citizens near Brentwood say wait. No state environmental impact report was done, and more information is needed before release.
If you compare the tests that have been required of Advanced Genetic Sciences with those required for any chemical pesticide, it's shocking. It's a scandal. They spend almost no money compared to a chemical company which spends $4 or $5 million doing tests to see if this causes problems.
This is an experiment. It's not a product registration. I know of no experiment in agriculture that has ever been exposed to such extensive review.
As you might expect, Advanced Genetic Sciences disagrees not enough tests were done. After years of lab and greenhouse work, they claim to have satisfied the needs of an EIR because of a federally required experimental permit.
These are extremely extensive, much more extensive than is required in an environmental impact report, and they essentially suffice, or in fact are more compelling than compiling an environmental impact report.
Nonetheless, despite AGS claims and arguments by scientists even out on the street, these groups will file a suit to block the test in Sacramento Wednesday and will give their petitions to county supervisors to consider. But unless that works...
We believe we have a significant and a compelling public support for this experiment, and we intend to continue and go ahead with it.
And with it, a new era of science or fear could start by this Friday. I'm Bill Van Amberg, Channel 7 News, East Bay Bureau.
Now, just to clarify here for those not familiar with all of this, the makers of the frostban bacteria believe it will substantially reduce frost damage in crops, perhaps saving millions of dollars a year if applied all over. As we said, the protests are nothing new on this issue, but it has always been very difficult to get a handle on precise objections to the test. Do they want genetic experimentation banned, period? What specifically is the fear? Do they have knowledge of any possible danger? Or is this just an example of what some have been calling, some of those who feel the other way, have been calling simply an anti-scientific fashion? With us is Andy Caffrey of the Berkeley Greens, precisely as possible. Andy, what is it that you fear here, as precisely as possible?
Well, there are a number of things. We're primarily concerned about health effects of this bacteria getting out in the environment. The bacteria they start with is known to cause disease in people with impaired immune systems. If they are playing around with this bacteria, and part of the bacteria that the body uses to recognize invading bacteria, this could be a greater risk to AIDS victims, people undergoing chemotherapy, and almost anybody with a severe immune system problem.
Andy, specifically, those are all sorts of things that are going to get some people who do not know about this specifically very, very upset. Are you essentially saying you don't ever want this kind of thing done outside of a laboratory?
No, what's happened is that AGS has gone out to the farmers and told them that this product would be very useful. Then they've turned around and told the EPA they don't have any plans to market it. As a result, the EPA gave them an exemption from doing animal tests to determine the possible health effects on humans and animals. If you look in that experimental use permit, you will find no tests on animals.
We're also hearing things from people, letters and so on, of people who obviously know absolutely nothing about this, and that's the basis of their fear. They're saying things like, what happens if I eat strawberries after they've been treated like this? Again, has that something to do with the kind of rhetoric that's been earlier in the piece we saw, shocking and scandalous, in reference to the tests that have not been done?
Well, it is shocking and scandalous. This is the beginning of a whole new industry that's as profound as the nuclear power industry. It's taken 40 years for us to win any kind of safeguards at all for nuclear power. At the beginning of that industry, we were told it would be too cheap to meter, that it was a clean alternative to fossil fuels, and right now we're just being told about the wonderful things about genetic engineering. I'm always suspicious when I hear nothing is wrong with something, and that's what the people in the government, the people with AGS have been telling the people in this community, and we've discovered that the people in the community are very concerned, and they want information from people who oppose this.
One last question to you. Do you know of any parallel between, say, the concerns about radioactivity and this? In other words, what is it parallel in your mind that has you this upset?
Well, the problem is you're dealing with something that is going to go anywhere it wants to go in nature. It reproduces, it mutates. Radiation doesn't even do that. What they are doing is they're saying, we have models about how this works in the environment, and basically the accuracy of the models is my concern. These people do not, they cannot take all of nature and compress it down to models. This stuff will do what it wants to do, and I'm very concerned when the EPA says we don't have the technology yet to monitor this stuff, yet they're going to release it anyways.
Andy Caffrey, again from the Berkeley Greens. You hear that side of the story. You've heard the company side of the story as well. It is difficult to tell at this point precisely how this will work itself out, or if the tests will begin or not begin.
An experiment that some people applaud and others are afraid of. The genetically altered bacteria frostban is going to be sprayed on a field in Contra Costa County at dawn tomorrow. Hank Plant is in our newsroom right now with word of a last-minute appeal. Excuse me, Hank.
Wendy, I just got off the phone with some lawyers who oppose the Frostban test. They have just filed papers with the District Court of Appeals in Sacramento asking that the test be put off at least for a few days. That could give them enough time to get another judge to look at the case. Right now, no one knows if the court will act on that appeal in time to stop the release of the bacteria that some believe may lead to potentially harmful new life forms.
This small field, 30 miles east of Oakland, looks more like a laboratory than a strawberry patch. As well it should. Scientific history will be made here Friday morning as researchers finally get to conduct the world's first open-air spraying of genetically altered bacteria. The EPA has already set up air monitoring equipment, watching for any effects other than what Frostban is supposed to do, reduce the effect of frost on crops. Today in a Sacramento courtroom, environmentalists who have been fighting the test lost their last chance to have it stopped.
This court is convinced that respondents are not unleashing some deleterious bacteria that's going to consume the city of Brentwood or anything else.
It was a long-awaited victory for genetic researchers from Oakland-based Advanced Genetic Sciences who have always maintained Frostban's safety.
We wouldn't be proceeding with this line of research if we felt it was a hazard.
The environmentalists who lost lashed out at the court, the state, and the EPA for approving the test.
I don't feel protected at all by the EPA. I think they're going to be as ineffective at protecting us from this industry as the IRS is at catching tax evaders.
For the scientists, this could be the end of a long battle. They've been trying to conduct an open-air test of Frostban for nearly 2 years.
And as we said, there is still a chance the test won't happen tomorrow morning. The people who oppose Frostban are waiting for word right now that the appeals court might hear their case and rule in their favor, but that decision has to come within the next 12 hours. That's it from the newsroom. I'm Hank Plant. Wendy, back to you.
Okay, Hank, thanks. We're certainly concerned and involved with the knowledge of just how dangerous some of these products may be. Today, as we saw that footage, we saw somebody in a full chemical suit. What is the danger of spraying Frostban?
The regulatory process, which has gone on for 3 or 4 years on this particular test, has indicated that there is no danger from this test. In fact, the Judge Lewis in Sacramento yesterday determined again, this was the second judge that determined the subject, that there is no credible evidence of any danger from this product to animals, plants, or humans, or the environment.
Thank you. Peter Staple is Associate General Counsel of the CETUS Corporation, and as you can see, there is a plan. It's a question of precisely where it will go, and there will obviously be a lot of contention over this as the steps take place.
Well, and it seems confusing, too, to say that there's no danger, and then you see somebody wearing that kind of a protective suit.
Right.
But we'll have more on this, of course.